2. Jon Newsome is still here. John Garrett from Sheffield United is still here, and so is James Shield of the Sheffield Star, though I'm sure he's got to go back to the office to put a shift in before his day is through. We were talking during the break about the gift that keeps on giving to Chris Wilder and the Sheffield United dressing room. Comments about their supposed style of play, and the very latest have come from a manager that you'd have thought would have had greater wisdom than to drop himself into this particular trap. Manuel Pellegrini, the West Ham manager, ahead of Sheffield United there on Saturday, comments to the effect today that Sheffield United were a direct team, typical English style of football, which was like very patronising and a put down. Your reaction?
Yeah, well, first off, surprised. Yeah. B, because as you say, he's wrong. I'll give Manuel Pellegrini possibly the benefit of the doubt, because obviously English isn't his first language. But we were talking about Declan Rice, you know, who sort of made similar comments, and yeah, that I don't get. Do you know, the thing that really surprises me as well is, and we were having this discussion in the office today, was about the amount of information and statistics and analysis that are available to football clubs these days. And this costs money. I'll tell you what, if that's what West Ham's analysis department and their statistical and software programs is coming up with, I think, you know what, they're probably better off saving it. Save some money and spend it on something else.
Declan Rice was apparently saying that Sheffield United all season they've just got men behind the ball. Jon Newsome.
Nonsense, isn't it? Absolute nonsense. You know, I've seen quite a bit of them. Yeah, for me, it's just laziness. It's you know, possibly they've been put on the spot. You know, if it's what is it, Thursday, they might have started doing a little bit of working training today. Maybe have done a little bit yesterday, but they'll not have done a lot of work on Sheffield United as yet. So maybe it's just a bit of laziness and
is it sort of, you know, a perception? And John, you raised this during the break. A perception of Sheffield United being, as they were in the Dave Bassett years, that kind of football, and also to some extent Neil Warnock.
Yeah, I suppose you get a reputation, and as John said and James said, if you're not doing your research and not looking at the information that's being collated, you've not watched us, how the hell would you know? Anybody that's watching Sheffield United play football at the moment knows it's at times nothing short of superb to watch. It's well thought out, it uses the ball well, it uses space well. The way the defenders play is brilliant to watch, and as we've all said, you just can't be watching Sheffield United at all.
At all. I mean, you know, what is good football anyway? I mean, the Bassett years and the Warnock years were not only successful, they had excitement of a raw sort, and I would say that a lot of, he uses the word direct, Pellegrini, I would say that a lot of Premier League football and teams is meaninglessly indirect.
Well, I was going to say, I think the other thing that this shows as well is there is a bit of football. I think there's a lot of snobbery in football now, and we've all fallen into the trap, or not all of us, but you know, we've watched the way Manchester City play, we've watched the way Barcelona play, and I think a lot of people have been conned. That's the only way to play football now, and that if you don't play it that way, you know, you're almost not worth anything. Well, you know, you go back in time, and two of my favourite players of all time, you know, you look at Johan Cruyff, you look at Ferenc Puskas. Two lovely players, graceful, wonderfully talented, but you know what, they also competed as well, and actually competing and putting a shift in and having a bit of attitude and a bit of character and being able to tackle, which is a dying art in, you know, in this day and age as well. There's nothing dirty about it. Like, you've got to do it.
I didn't know
that's why I suspect Arsenal tripped up the other day and keep tripping up.
Do you not think it's sometimes just a media thing as well? You know, there's hundreds of media outlets now, aren't there? You know, newspapers, online, TV. Look at the thing about Manchester City and Stones, when, you know, they made a big hoo-ha about he wasn't ready to come on the pitch.
It was a nonsense.
For me, they're trying to fill the airway, aren't they? And it's a massive contradiction, isn't it? Because how do you have overlapping centre halves and then you've got they sit behind the ball and they lump it from back to front? Well, it's a massive contradiction. You know, one doesn't fit the other. So for me, I just feel sometimes they might do you know, an hour's worth of interviews with 10 different players, and the snippet is that Declan Rice has said, well, they sit behind the ball, don't they? Oh, right, let's flag that one up. And I just think they make mountains out of molehills sometimes for me.
Mind you, those comments did jar today. I think anybody who read them. You know, there are pundits as well, no names, no pack drill, who fall into the same trap even more spectacularly this season. But I think they're becoming perhaps more enlightened as the season goes on. James, I'm going to substitute you shortly. I'm ever so sorry about this.
That's all right.
Another James is coming in, but you've done the job. You've contributed to a winning team, and it's a squad game.
It is.
But I really appreciate you coming in. Just before you go on Tevez, your recollections of covering that story. I remember how tense it got at one particular point because it narrowed down to figures being discussed, and I remember falling out spectacularly with the then chairman of Sheffield United, who strangely he won £20 million for the club, is now, well, is persona non grata a reasonable way of describing, you know, how he's now frozen out on the outside, which is ironic, isn't it? This weekend, a man who, you know, whatever else we're talking about, he had a personal crusade on this and earned £20 million for his football club, you know. It's somewhat ironic, the twist of circumstances.
It is, and you know, I think times change, eras change at football clubs. The one thing that I just hope people, you know, and I don't just mean at the club, I mean outside looking, you know, from the outside looking in as well, don't fall into is the fact that if you're with one, you've got to be against the other. You know, life's not like that.
No, absolutely not. But the figure, I tell this probably for the first time, and it's not with any malice at anybody. I remember doing a story for a national paper, I won't say which paper it was, to the effect that, you know, without any quotes from anybody, that Sheffield United were moving to a position of being prepared to negotiate with West Ham United. And the figures that were sort of being bandied around at the time were like 20 million at the lowest and 30 million at the highest as compensation. And the paper that took an interest in this said, well, we like this, but we need you to take a stab at what Sheffield United might settle at. And I said, well, I've no idea. Well, just have a guess. I said, well, I will, as long as it's down story and it's clear that it's, just speculation on my behalf. So I took a punt. I said, you know, wonder if they might settle at 25 million. Paper the next day, it's right at the top in the intro, and the headline says something like, give us £25 million and we'll settle. Sheffield United tell West Ham. It didn't go down very well at Bramall Lane, but actually it was £5 million more than they got in the end. So it wasn't a bad stab at it, was it?
You nearly did him a favour.
I think I did. I honestly think I did Sheffield United a favour indirectly, but it's just the way that these pressures of the media industry, you know, can sometimes twist something, and the man in the middle can be really squeezed. As I was on that occasion.
We always blame the headline writers as well, don't we?
We do. We don't write the headlines, do we?
We don't.
None of us write the headlines. Well, have a good weekend. I hope you enjoy you've not been to the City of London Stadium before, have you?
Not to work. I have been, but not to work.
Yeah. Why would it be Chelsea? I don't know. There's possibly another story in that. James, thanks very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate you coming in. James Gregg will come in with a roundup of other events shortly. The job, John, that Gary Monk is doing quietly, I think, almost going below the radar at Sheffield Wednesday. 7 games, only 1 defeat. Very hard to beat.
Yeah, I mean, what I hear coming out of the camp is that it's very organised. Everybody knows it's not overcomplicated. You know, you've got 3 or 4 bits per player. That's your job. That's your role. A lot of it's about what happens in the middle of the park. So it's not, you know, we've stopped playing keep ball on the edge of our penalty area. We're playing football in the right areas, I feel. And I think he's just gone back to basics. And I think that's probably what he was as a player, wasn't it? And that's what
I see
his
similarities with his
remit is.
Leeds United, because he often played with the one striker. It was Chris Wood, mind you, scored a spectacular number of goals.
He
And
did,
Wood
yeah,
had
but
that system.
he also, he switched it up when we went to Middlesbrough.
Yeah.
He played with Fletcher and New. So I think he's one where it's probably horses for courses.
How do you think he'll approach this one then?
Be really interested to see what happens the formation-wise, because Leeds tinkered with theirs on Saturday against Birmingham. So I think it'll be a little bit of a game of chess for the first 10 or 15, 20 minutes. But yeah, I mean, they both play with a solitary striker, so interesting to see if they play with a 2 or the back 4, or they go with a 3.
Yeah, I don't know. You know more than me about the inside of football, but I'd have thought that against a possession-based team like Leeds United, that Sheffield Wednesday will go again with a 5 across midfield to negate that. I'd be surprised if he goes for 2 strikers.
Yeah, no, I would. I'd be very surprised, but I just think, I wonder whether, because Leeds will play with, I think Leeds will probably play with the back 4 with Calvin Phillips sat in front of them, and then the full-backs get forward, and he has 2 wide players with Bamford. But the question mark is whether Bamford or Nketiah will play up top. Nketiah's done well. He scored a hat-trick in the under-21s. He came on at Preston and scored, got the equaliser. So, but I was at the Birmingham game and he swapped it at half-time, and I felt that they just lacked that. Once Bamford had come off, they just lacked that physicality. Nketiah's not the biggest. He'll run the channel. He's quick, but sometimes you need a little bit more than that when you're just playing with a lone striker, as Sheffield Wednesday have found out themselves when Fletcher's been missing.
Who's the one player Leeds wouldn't fancy seeing up against them? Is that player FF? Looked sharp the other night when he came off the bench.
I think Nando's. I think he's had a bit of a torrid 18 months, 2 years, hasn't he? He's been in and out. He's had the racist slur. He's had a couple of injuries. I really feel that he's not really got going. I also think he's that kind of player that you can't just throw him in one game and expect him to set the world on fire. I think he needs a bit of a run, where you probably have to take him to one side and say, look, I'm going to give you 5 games. You're going to start every one, and you've got to show me in those 5 games that you are he's a match winner on his day. He's a match winner.
You can see him having an impact from the bench. One player that nearly always plays well for Sheffield Wednesday is Barry Bannon. Have you noticed that, James?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, good left peg. What are you trying to insinuate here? Looking at me like Barry Bannon. I do get that shouted across car park forecourt, across the forecourts a lot of me. All right, Baz, and then I sort of turn around and go, it's not Barry Bannon actually.
They are.
Yeah.
That's the reason.
Is that why you brought it up?
No
Thanks.
other reason at
Thanks
all.
a lot.
So we're going to
Great player though. I'll take it as a compliment.
Absolutely. We'll go back. We'll go back to these 2 big games in a moment. But
Yeah.
in the meantime, I know that you do the modern thing. I do the old-fashioned.
Yeah, well, I'd
piece
started
of
off with little
paper.
scraps of paper,
Yeah.
and then sort of 5 years later, I realised, why don't I just do it on my
And I've
phone?
got Johnny to talk about with this book.
Absolutely, it looks like a really good book, that, as well, to me. Yeah, perfect. Can't wait to hear
Cheers,
about that. No, absolutely. We've talked obviously enough about our 2 football league clubs in the city. We'll talk about Sheffield United women actually at the moment. Carla Ward's team, they're in the Women's Super League 2, as many of you know. They're actually 2nd in the table at the moment. They've got Charlton, who are bottom of the table in their next match. Get behind the girls. That one's at the Olympic Legacy Park on Sunday. Hallam, they were unbeaten in 8 games. That was until Jordan Turner, friend of the show, of course. We were actually waxing lyrical about his goal-scoring exploits this season just a couple of weeks ago. But he's injured at the moment, so that's sort of scuppered Hallam a little bit. I know they're scratching around for a replacement because they're a little bit short on numbers. Actually, they're away at Ollerton Town at the weekend. Sheffield FC, they're 7th in their league. They've got Lincoln United at the Coach and Horses, 3 p.m. on Saturday. It's also their 162nd birthday today. So happy birthday to Sheffield Club. Remarkable stuff from them. In rugby union, it's all eyes on England in their World Cup semi-final, of course, against New Zealand on Saturday morning. But after that, locally, if you want some more rugby union, Tigers, they're away at Huddersfield. Sheffield Rugby Club away at Nuneaton. That's having only lost once this season in the third tier of English rugby. The Sheffield Steelers, they've won their last 3 league games. They're home to Coventry on Saturday, away at Fife on Sunday. Sheffield Sharks, they're top of their British Basketball League Cup group. They've got Newcastle Eagles in that competition tomorrow night at home. And also, just to mark your card as well, been meaning to sort of mention this guy and perhaps even get him in, Biggsy, actually. Tommy Frank, local boxer, making a bit of a name for himself. He's a Blades fan, as you know. John, I'm sure he's been down to the lane and been on the pitch and all that kind of stuff, hasn't he?
That qualifies him then, does it?
Just a bit, yeah. He's the WBC International Super Flyweight champion. So lots of people, you know, amazing boxers have held that belt. His next fight is Friday, 29th of November at Ponds Forge. He's trained by Glyn Rhodes as well. Perhaps could get them in. I know Glyn's been in before. But tickets now on sale for that fight, 29th of November. So,
excellent.
there we go.
I'll tell you what a publicity coup for Sheffield Collegiate Cricket Club and Josh Varley, the captain.
Absolutely, it's in every national paper.
Joe Root just going back to his roots, as it were. That was the obvious headline.
Obvious headline.
To get some coaching from an old mate.
It's interesting because in the summer, sort of mid-Ashes, they had that sort of 2-week gap between the first and the second test. And I was sort of, as you know, I'm a friend of Joe's, and we were round at his house, and on a Friday night, I said, "What are you doing in the morning?" He said, "Well, I'm up at 7 before all the Saturday teams get to the ground and stuff." And Josh was there with the dog thrower throwing balls at him at sort of 7, 7:30 in the mid-Ashes. Yeah. And not particularly coaching him on much, because obviously he's the England captain, doesn't need much guidance, but just throwing balls repeatedly at him, short balls and that. Yeah, really interesting stuff.
I've talked to Josh about Josh. He's a regular viewer. Josh would be very welcome on this sofa in one of the coming weeks.
Absolutely, yeah.
I said if you wanted to bring Joe with him, that's fine as well.
Yeah, I'm sure we could make room for him.
It's up to him. We wouldn't say no, would we?
No, absolutely not.
We wouldn't say no. Thanks very much, James.
No worries.
This book, Folklore and Fables, I see you every time I do a match. I took a little picture of you the other night when you were addressing your flock.
Oh, it was you,
on your tour. Yes, it was me. Put it on Twitter. Yeah, and one of your colleagues, Matt Casbolt, sent me a tweet saying that I should alert the public before I put a picture of you out, because there could be children watching.
It's very brave coming out of Matt's mouth, but I'm going to leave it at that, Alan, on that one.
So, favourite stories? I mean, there's so many, going way, way back, to well before you were born, etc. But
yeah, I think that when we started doing it, we wanted to write something different from the normal programme stuff. And I'd always done former player interviews, and I've always run the former player society while I've been at United. But it's sort of evolved. It sort of involves my family, me. It would be fair to say that my family on the whole a little bit eccentric, and both mum and dad long gone, bless them. But Dad was a brilliant character, and I think the 3 things in his life other than football he really cared about was Sheffield United Football Club, his family, Yorkshire County Cricket Club, and maybe the Labour Party, in no specific order. So you never had a chance. Born and brought up very near to the ground. Dad was around there from the late 1920s doing bits and bobs. So I was always dragged to United games. Older brother dragged me to United games. And your life sort of evolves around the football club. And when you come to actually work inside, that amount of blading, if you like, sort of pushes you in different areas with players, get stories out of people. So thankfully I didn't have to pick the best ones out. Danny Hull did that.
right.
I don't think you can do your own stuff.
I remember a story. A part of your pre-match routine was to take the ball boys and families, etc., round backstage, including the dressing rooms. And at one point, Neil Warnock banned you and that dressing you from the dressing room area, didn't he?
Yeah, we got blamed for we lost at home to Brighton, I think. And Neil was looking for somebody to blame on the Monday morning at the training ground. And sort of rounded on me. I just answered the wrong place at the wrong time. I said, "Your bloody fault with the kids in there. It's distracting. No more." I said, "Right, so you want me to tell the kids that they can't come in there with the parents?" Yep, you do that. right, I'll do that then, no problem. And I think we did it for 1 game or 2 games, I can't remember, and we lost both games. So the next one was Rotherham, and we put the mascots back in, and they won. And he sort of said, well, I told you, it was your fault. But that was the sort of reaction you get from Neil. But it's true, yeah, he did ban us for 1 or 2 games from taking the kids in to meet the players before a match, yeah.
Magical though, that. As a kid, I was a mascot, you won't remember, in 2003.
Was it me who looked after you?
It was, yeah. It showed us round and all that kind of stuff. I know probably makes you feel a bit old, that. But it was brilliant. And I remember sort of going in, such an exciting part of the match day mascot experience, isn't it? Going in and holding the shirt up and the photographer and all that kind of stuff.
And it still is, it's still something, I mean, down the years I don't do so much with mascots now, but as a club we work really, really hard with stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's nice when you get people that walk into you in town in pubs and go, do you remember when you had me as mascot for Millwall? Yeah, but it's part of the tapestry of football, yeah.
Yeah, it's great that you've got this offbeat take on incidents that have happened over the years and personalities that, and there are many stories I'm sure that you couldn't print.
Loads. Yeah, that's the when you retire book, that one. Yeah.
I enjoy this sort of old school look of the cover as well. You know, Jon Garrett Esquire.
I
like that a lot. You've got the sort of old sort of formation. I'm guessing that's your favourite 11.
No, Danny's done it. We were bouncing ideas around, and I just said for a cover, it'd be really good to use an old United programme, one that you can get sued for copyright for. And on my desk, I'd got a 1911-12 season United Wednesday derby game programme. Sat there, and I looked and thought, that cover's great. We could really use that, and of course, not get sued for it. So Danny went away and had a fiddle around with it, and I think it looks really, really good. I'm pleased with it.
Fantastic.
Excellent. I've had a flick through, and I well recommend it to
not
not only any Blades fan, any football fan, to be quite honest. I suppose with a couple of minutes left, we come to the prediction part of the programme, don't we, for the weekend fixtures?
John's favourite part.
He's about to leave He's about to join James Gregg over there back on the bench.
James Shield.
Everything you said you wouldn't do now, you get sucked into.
Exactly.
Johnny, you've got no reason to be anything but optimistic about Sheffield United at West Ham. Yeah.
Always fancy us. Some of the best performances away. Everton, they were superb. Away at Chelsea, they were superb. Don't think we'll go into that ground with any fear whatsoever. Sold out the away following. I fancy us to win 2-1.
Oh, no, there you go. He's emphatic. Come out.
Is good.
Jon Newsome, a lifelong owl, despite a certain allegiance to Leeds at once.
You said you weren't going to do this, didn't you?
Did I say I wouldn't go with a prediction? You can always have a draw. Honestly,
I think every media outlet this week has been asking Jon this question, so he should be used to it by now.
I was asked on TalkSport by Adrian Durham the other night. I was doing a preview from Hillsborough, a chatty one, and he finished it off by saying, "Alan, let me ask you this: you were at Bramall Lane last night. You're at Hillsborough tonight. Which of the 2 grounds do you prefer going to?" What a question
that is!
Yeah.
So I paused and I just said,
So you thought I'll crash that on Newsome when he comes in on
I'll take it out. I'll take it out.
I'll give him a bit of pain instead.
So I paused.
There's only a minute left. If you carry on padding, you're going to get to the end. You won't have to answer.
I just said the Proac Stadium, but anyway, it's going to be a tight game. I'll kick it off then. I think it'll be a draw, 1-1. Sheffield Wednesday Leeds.
I find it difficult to argue against that. You know, it's impossible, isn't it?
Yeah, of
course it's impossible to predict it.
Oh, of course it is. It's just a bit of fun, and we won't remember it, even if whatever you say.
I think
we won't.
Until they record it and play it back.
Was it a couple of years ago? Was it last year or a couple of years ago? I think Leeds came down and battered Wednesday for about half an hour, and Sheffield Wednesday won 3-0. You know, it's the Yorkshire derbies, aren't they?
Bizarre,
the derbies, you know.
Tell you what, 20 seconds left. I've only got time to thank everybody. James Shield of the Sheffield Star, James Gregg as ever, Jon Garrett, author, raconteur, Blades supporter liaison officer, and Jon Newsome, football agent, and marvellous of him to come in again to talk about the game this weekend. Repeat at 11 on my YouTube later. See you soon. Bye-bye.